My fiancé wanted a polyamorous lifestyle, but only for her. You're too boring to find anyone else. I found someone else in 24 hours. She cried betrayal when I served her eviction papers. All right, Reddit, buckle up because this one's a doozy. My fiancé tried to gaslight me into an open relationship, told me I was too boring to find anyone else, and then had a complete mental breakdown when I called her bluff in less than 24 hours. The eviction papers were just the cherry on top. Here's how it all went down. I'm Ryan, 31 years old, and I work as a commercial property appraiser here in Columbus, Ohio. Been doing it for about 7 years now after getting my degree and certifications. The job's not glamorous, but it pays well, and I'm good at it. Basically, I evaluate commercial buildings, run comps, analyze market trends, and tell banks and investors what properties are actually worth. Requires a lot of attention to detail and the ability to spot when people are trying to pull a fast one. Skills that would come in handy later, as it turns out. The job involves a lot of windshield time driving between properties, a lot of spreadsheets and databases, and a lot of dealing with people who think their building is worth twice what the market says. You develop a thick skin and a good detector for nonsense. Most importantly, you learn that emotions don't change facts. A building is worth what it's worth regardless of how the owner feels about it. Same principle applies to a lot of things in life. I bought my house at 26 during a market dip. Nothing fancy, just a solid 3-bedroom ranch in a decent suburb with a 2-car garage and a finished basement. Paid my mortgage on time every month, kept up with maintenance, even installed a new HVAC system last year. The kind of boring, responsible adult stuff that apparently makes me predictable and safe, according to some people. The house was my pride and joy, honestly. I'd spent 2 years fixing it up exactly how I wanted it. New hardwood floors in the living room, granite countertops in the kitchen, a deck out back that I built myself over 2 weekends with help from my buddy Craig. Nothing extravagant, just solid quality improvements that would hold their value. The basement I converted into a proper entertainment space with a big screen TV and some comfortable furniture for game days. Even had a small workshop area in the garage where I'd mess around with woodworking projects when I needed to clear my head. That's where Megan comes in. Met her 4 years ago at this networking event my company sponsored. She was working as an event coordinator for the venue, running around with a headset and clipboard looking like she owned the place. Confident, sharp, knew how to command a room. I was impressed. She had this energy that drew people to her, like she was constantly in motion even when standing still. During her breaks, she'd come over to the refreshment area where I was loitering, and we started chatting about nothing in particular. She found it amusing that I could estimate the square footage of the venue just by looking around. I found it amusing that she genuinely seemed interested in hearing me explain how I did it. We hit it off immediately. She had this energy about her that felt exciting compared to my methodical lifestyle. Where I was spreadsheets and schedules, she was spontaneity and adventure. Opposites attract, right? That's what I told myself anyway. By month 3, she'd basically moved into my place. By month 6, it was official. By year 2, I proposed because that's what you do when you're building a life with someone. Got down on one knee at this waterfall in Hocking Hills during a hiking trip. Had the ring hidden in my backpack for 3 days, waiting for the perfect moment. She said yes, cried happy tears, posted about 17 Instagram stories about it. The whole fairy tale package. The proposal was this whole production that I'd planned for weeks, coordinated with her best friend to make sure she'd be wearing something nice that day without getting suspicious. Had a photographer hiding in the woods to capture the moment. Even arranged for her favorite bottle of sparkling cider to be chilling in the car for afterward. Every detail accounted for because that's just how I operate. Her parents loved me. My parents loved her. We were the couple that had it all figured out. The ones people pointed to as relationship goals. At least that's what it looked like from the outside. Her dad, Frank, was this retired electrician who respected that I owned my own home and had a stable career. We'd spend Sunday afternoons during football season watching games in my basement, talking about home improvement projects, and complaining about whatever referee call had just gone against our team. Her mom, Linda, treated me like family from day one, always making sure I had enough food at family dinners, and asking about my work like she genuinely cared about property valuation. My parents were equally enthusiastic. My mom kept dropping hints about grandchildren, and my dad would pull Megan aside to tell her embarrassing stories from my childhood that she found endlessly amusing. Thanksgiving at my parents' house had become a whole production, with both families mixing together, like we'd known each other for decades instead of years. The cracks started showing around year 3. Megan had always been more social than me. I'm not antisocial or anything. I just prefer smaller gatherings over massive parties. She started going out more with her friends, which I didn't think much about at first. People need their own space and their own lives outside a relationship. That's healthy. But then the complaints started. You never want to do anything exciting anymore. Why can't you be more spontaneous? All we do is sit around this house like an old married couple. Meanwhile, I'm over here planning weekend trips and date nights that she keeps canceling because something better came up with her friends. I tried to adapt at first, suggested we take a weekend trip to Chicago on short notice. She said she couldn't get off work, planned a surprise anniversary dinner at this upscale restaurant she'd been wanting to try. She'd already made plans with her coworkers, offered to take her to that concert she'd mentioned wanting to see. She'd already gotten tickets with her friend group. The irony was lost on her, apparently. Then she started mentioning this guy Brandon from her gym. At first, it was innocent stuff about their workout routines and whatever supplements he was taking. Brandon says this protein powder is amazing. Brandon hit a new deadlift PR. Brandon thinks we should all go hiking sometime. Cool. Great. Glad Brandon exists. But then Brandon started appearing everywhere. Brandon was at the same brunch spot we went to. Brandon happened to be at the same concert. Brandon's advice seemed to supersede anything I said about literally any topic. Brandon thinks cardio before weights is better. Brandon says intermittent fasting changed his life. Brandon. The guy was apparently some kind of fitness influencer wannabe who worked part-time as a personal trainer while trying to build his social media following. Had all these ideas about living life to the fullest and not being tied down by conventional expectations. The kind of surface-level philosophy that sounds profound until you realize it's just an excuse to avoid responsibility. I'm not the jealous type. I've always believed that if someone wants to cheat, they're going to cheat regardless of how much you monitor them. Trust is the foundation. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't, then why are you even together? But even I could see what was happening here. Started noticing the little things. How she'd angle her phone away when texting. How she'd suddenly need to take this call in private. How she'd come home from the gym looking fresher than someone who just worked out for an hour. The patterns were obvious if you were paying attention, which I unfortunately was. The confrontation came on a random Tuesday evening in September. I'd just gotten home from a long day of property inspections and was looking forward to making dinner and catching up on some shows. Megan was sitting at the kitchen table with this look on her face like she was about to deliver a TED Talk. "We need to have a serious conversation about our relationship," she announced before I even got my jacket off. Here we go. She launched into this whole prepared speech about how she'd been doing a lot of soul searching and realized that traditional monogamy was limiting her personal growth. She used words like ethical non-monogamy and polyamorous exploration and expanding our capacity for love. It sounded rehearsed, probably because it was. I just stood there listening, waiting for the punchline. She went on for a good 10 minutes about how society conditions us to believe that one person can meet all our needs, how that's actually unrealistic and harmful, how the most evolved relationships involve multiple connections that serve different purposes. Like she'd memorized a pamphlet or something. "I think we should open our relationship," she finally said. "I've been reading about it, and I think it could actually strengthen what we have. It would give us both the freedom to explore connections with other people while maintaining our primary bond." Connections with other people, I repeated flatly. "Like Brandon?" Her face twitched. "This isn't about Brandon. This is about us evolving as people and not being constrained by outdated societal expectations." Right. Just happened to bring this up after months of Brandon worship. Total coincidence. I asked the obvious question. "So, you want to sleep with other people?" "I want us both to have the freedom to form meaningful connection. It's not just about physical intimacy. It's about emotional fulfillment and personal development." "Okay, so if I started seeing someone else, you'd be fine with that?" She laughed. Actually laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an uncomfortable laugh, but a genuine amused chuckle like I'd told a joke. "Ryan, let's be realistic here. You're not exactly the type to go out and find someone else. You're comfortable, stable, dependable. Those are great qualities for a husband, but not exactly exciting. I love you, but we both know you'd probably just stay home and watch documentaries while I'm out having new experiences." I stared at her for a long moment. "You're saying I'm too boring to find anyone else?" "I'm saying you're not really wired that way. And that's okay. This arrangement would actually work in your favor because you wouldn't have to worry about keeping me entertained all the time. I could get my excitement elsewhere and come home to you for stability. It's the best of both worlds." The audacity was almost impressive. She'd somehow convinced herself that this was a reasonable proposal that any sane person would accept. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want permission to sleep with Brandon and whoever else catches your attention, while I sit here being your safety net. And you're framing this as something that benefits me. You're oversimplifying it." "No, I think I'm simplifying it exactly the right amount." She got frustrated then. Started talking about how I was being closed-minded and how she thought I was more progressive than this. How other couples make it work all the time. How she didn't expect me to be so judgmental. How this was about personal freedom and growth, not about her wanting to cheat with some gym guy. I let her talk herself out. Then I said something that apparently blindsided her completely. Fine, let's do it. She stopped mid-sentence. Wait, what? You want an open relationship? Fine, we're open, starting right now. But fair is fair, Megan. Same rules apply to both of us. You can go do whatever you want with Brandon or anyone else, and I'll do the same. Her expression shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like concern. I mean, of course the same rules would apply. That's the whole point. But Ryan, you should really think about this before making any impulsive decision. Impulsive. That was rich coming from the woman who just proposed restructuring our entire relationship based on her attraction to a fitness influencer. I've heard enough, I told her. You wanted open. You got open. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some personal development to do. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, while she was still stammering about how we should set ground rules and establish boundaries. Funny how those things became important the second the arrangement went both ways. The thing about being underestimated is that people never see it coming when you prove them wrong. I'm not some social recluse who doesn't know how to talk to women. I just chose to be loyal to someone who apparently didn't deserve it. Big difference. Before Megan, I dated plenty, had a few serious relationships, never had trouble meeting people when I actually put myself out there. Just because I preferred quiet evenings at home didn't mean I couldn't hold a conversation or make a good impression when I wanted to. So I drove to this restaurant bar downtown that I knew had a good happy hour crowd. Not my usual scene, but I cleaned up nice when I wanted to, and tonight I wanted to. Stop by my buddy Craig's place first to borrow a nicer shirt since all mine were at home where Megan was presumably having a minor crisis. Sat down at the bar, ordered a ginger ale because I needed to keep my head clear, and just started talking to people. Not hitting on anyone aggressively, just being social, asking questions, listening to answers, being genuinely interested in what people had to say. Basic human interaction stuff that apparently counts as witchcraft in the modern dating world. That's how I met Natalie. She was there with some coworkers celebrating someone's promotion, sitting a few stools down and looking mildly bored with whatever conversation her group was having. We made eye contact. I smiled. She smiled back. I walked over and asked if the seat next to her was taken. Sometimes it really is that simple. Turns out Natalie was a physical therapist at a sports medicine clinic nearby. Smart, funny, had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. She was celebrating her friend's promotion, but seemed more interested in actual conversation than the loud group dynamics happening behind her. We talked for maybe 2 hours about everything and nothing. Jobs, hobbies, travel, family. She mentioned she was recently single, after ending a long-term thing that had run its course. Guy had been nice enough, but they'd grown in different directions. Neither of them had been happy for months. She appreciated that sometimes things just don't work out. And there's no villain in the story. I found myself actually enjoying the conversation, rather than going through the motions. She asked thoughtful questions, actually listened to the answers, and had opinions that she could defend without getting defensive. When I mentioned that I worked in property appraisal, she didn't immediately glaze over like most people. Instead, she asked how I'd gotten into it and what made a good appraiser versus a mediocre one. By the end of the night, I had her number and plans to get dinner later that week. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not because I was exciting or spontaneous, but because I was actually paying attention to her instead of waiting for my turn to talk. What a concept. When I got home around 11, Megan was waiting up in the living room with this anxious energy about her. Where have you been? I tried calling you like 6 times. Out, being open. I held up my phone. Got dinner plans with someone named Natalie on Friday. Just wanted to keep you informed since we're doing the whole honest communication thing now. Her face went through about 12 different expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, disbelief, anger, jealousy, then finally landing on accusation. You went out and got someone's number? Tonight? We literally just talked about this. Yeah, you said I was too boring to find anyone else. Figured I'd test that theory. I shrugged. Turns out it was wrong. This isn't how this was supposed to work. How was it supposed to work, Megan? You get to go play with Brandon while I sit home alone wondering what you're up to? That doesn't sound like an equal arrangement to me. She started crying then. Not sad tears, frustrated tears, the kind where someone's plans aren't going the way they imagined, and they don't know how to course correct. You're doing this to hurt me. You're not actually interested in this Natalie person. You're just trying to make a point. Does it matter? You want it open? We're open. Unless the rules are different for you than they are for me? I just think we should slow down and really think about what we're doing here. This is a big change, and we shouldn't rush into anything. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Megan, you've clearly been thinking about this for months. You came to me with a whole presentation. The only thing that's changed is now I'm a participant, instead of just your backup plan. If you're not comfortable with that, maybe monogamy wasn't the problem after all. She didn't have a response for that. Friday came around and I took Natalie to this Italian place I'd been wanting to try. Little family-owned spot that made their pasta fresh daily. We had an amazing time. She was easy to talk to, laughed at my dumb jokes, and didn't once make me feel like I was too boring to be around. When I mentioned that I owned my house outright and had a stable career, she seemed impressed rather than bored. "That's actually really attractive," she said. "Most guys my age are still figuring out basic adult responsibilities. You've got your life together." What a revelation. Apparently, some people actually value stability and planning ahead. Who knew? We ended up going on 3 more dates over the next 2 weeks. Movies, hiking, dinner at her place where she cooked me this incredible Thai curry from scratch. Each time I came home, Megan was there with some new complaint or concern about how this was moving too fast and how I was getting too attached and how we needed to reassess our boundaries. The hypocrisy was staggering. She'd spent months cultivating something with Brandon before even bringing up the open relationship thing. But me having a few nice dinners with someone was suddenly too much too fast. Meanwhile, she'd been spending more time at Brandon's place, sometimes not coming home until morning. But somehow that was different because it was emotionally responsible, or whatever justification she was using that week. She'd claim they were taking things slow and being intentional, even though she'd literally stay overnight at his apartment 3 nights in a row. Things came to a head about a month into our new arrangement. I was getting ready for another date with Natalie when Megan came into the bedroom and sat on the bed with this pouty expression. "I don't think this is working," she announced. "What's not working?" "This whole open thing. I think we made a mistake. I think we should go back to being exclusive." I stopped buttoning my shirt. "You want to close the relationship now?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize that what I have with you is special. I don't want to lose that. Brandon was just a distraction. I see that now. What we have is real." The timing was interesting. Brandon had apparently mentioned something about moving to Seattle for a job opportunity. Some fitness company was expanding their training program and wanted him to help launch the new location. Funny how her commitment to our relationship suddenly renewed the moment her side piece started packing boxes. "So, let me understand this," I said carefully. "You pushed for an open relationship so you could be with Brandon. Now that Brandon's leaving, you want to go back to monogamy. And you expect me to just drop everything I've built with Natalie because you changed your mind? I'm your fiancé, Ryan. We're supposed to be building a life together. This was always just a phase for us to get out of our systems. Now we can move forward and focus on what really matters." "What about what matters to me?" She looked confused, like the question didn't compute. "I'm saying I want you. I'm saying I choose us. Isn't that what you wanted?" "That's what I wanted a month ago before you told me I was too boring for anyone to want. Before you spent every weekend at another man's apartment while I was supposed to just wait around. You don't get to rearrange my life based on your convenience, Megan." Her eyes hardened. "So what? You're choosing some random woman you've known for a month over your fiancé of 3 years? I'm choosing not to be your backup plan. There's a difference." The next few weeks were tense. Megan alternated between trying to be sweet and affectionate to win me back and being cold and resentful that it wasn't working. She'd make my favorite meals, suggest watching shows we used to enjoy together, try to initiate intimate moments that I politely declined. Then, when none of that worked, she'd get angry and distant for days. She started making passive-aggressive comments about Natalie whenever I mentioned her, asking pointed questions about her job, her appearance, her past relationships, trying to find something to criticize. "She's a physical therapist? Does she make good money doing that?" Or, "How old is she exactly? She seems immature from what you've described." When that didn't work, she tried a different approach. Started going out more again, posting pictures on social media at clubs and parties, trying to make me jealous. Sometimes she'd come home late and make a big show of being secretive about where she'd been. Classic manipulation tactics that might have worked on a less observant person. But here's the thing about working in property appraisal. You learn to recognize when people are putting on a show versus when something real is happening. You develop instincts for deception and overvaluation. And everything about Megan's behavior screamed desperation, rather than actual contentment. What really sealed the deal was the fight we had in November. She came home one evening while Natalie was over for dinner. I'd made my grandmother's beef stew recipe, and we were eating at the kitchen table when Megan walked in and just stopped dead in the doorway. The look on her face could have curdled milk. "What is she doing here?" Megan demanded. "Having dinner," I said calmly. "Natalie, this is Megan." "Megan, this is Natalie." Natalie stood up and extended her hand with a polite smile. "It's nice to finally meet you. Ryan's mentioned you." Megan ignored the handshake completely. "Ryan, can I talk to you in private?" "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here. We're all adults." Bad move on my part. Or maybe the exact right move depending on how you look at it. Megan lost it. Started screaming about how disrespectful it was to have another woman in her house, how I was deliberately humiliating her, how she couldn't believe I would be so cruel after everything she'd sacrificed for our relationship. The works. Full theatrical performance complete with hand gestures and voice cracking for dramatic effect. Natalie, to her credit, stayed completely calm. I should probably go, she said quietly, gathering her things. No, I said firmly. You're my guest, and you haven't done anything wrong. Megan, if you can't handle the situation you created, that's your problem to sort out. That sent Megan into another spiral. She started bringing up every perceived slight from our entire relationship. Times I'd been boring, times I'd prioritized work, times I'd failed to meet her expectations, like she was building a legal case for why her behavior was justified. 3 years of accumulated grievances weaponized in a single kitchen confrontation. Through it all, I just sat there eating my stew, occasionally making eye contact with Natalie to silently communicate that yes, this was as ridiculous as it seemed. When Megan finally ran out of steam, chest heaving, and mascara running down her face, I said the thing I'd been building toward for weeks. This isn't working anymore. What? Us. This relationship. It's over, Megan. I want you to move out. The color drained from her face. You can't be serious. You're breaking up with me over her. I'm breaking up with you because you don't respect me. You wanted an open relationship so you could sleep around while I waited patiently at home. When I actually participated, you couldn't handle it. You've spent months trying to manipulate me back under control instead of treating me like an equal partner. I'm done. She started crying again. Real tears this time. Where am I supposed to go? I've been living here for 3 years. All my stuff is here. Our life is here. That's for you to figure out. I'll give you 30 days to find somewhere else, which is more than generous considering you're not on the lease and don't pay the mortgage. You can't just kick me out of my own home. It's not your home, Megan. It's mine. Your name isn't on anything because you always said paperwork was too boring to deal with. Remember that? She did remember. I could see it in her face. Every time I'd suggested adding her to the deed or setting up a joint account, she'd waved it off as unnecessary. We were going to be married anyway. What did it matter? Now she was realizing exactly what it mattered. Natalie left shortly after that, giving my hand a squeeze and telling me to call her later. Megan spent the rest of the night alternating between crying, screaming, and trying to seduce me. None of it worked. My mind was made up. The next 30 days were absolute chaos. Megan refused to accept that the relationship was over. She kept trying to initiate conversations about working through this and remembering why we fell in love. She'd swing from being apologetic and accommodating to being hostile and vindictive, depending on her mood. One day, she'd make breakfast and leave notes around the house about how much she loved me. The next, she'd be slamming doors and giving me the silent treatment. She also started weaponizing her social circle. Her friends would text me about how heartless I was being, how Megan was falling apart, how I was destroying her life over some meaningless fling. Her mother called me twice to lecture me about commitment and responsibility. Even her father sent this long message about how disappointed he was in my lack of loyalty. All of them conveniently ignored the part where Megan had pushed for an open relationship specifically so she could be with another man. That part didn't fit the narrative, apparently. In her version of events, I'd suddenly and without warning decided to throw away our relationship for someone I'd just met. The context was edited out. Meanwhile, Megan wasn't actually packing or looking for apartments. She seemed to believe that if she just waited long enough, I'd change my mind. Every time I asked about her housing plans, she'd give some vague answer about looking into options or talking to friends about their spare rooms. By week 3, it became clear she had no intention of leaving voluntarily. That's when I started the formal eviction process, filed the paperwork, got everything properly documented, served her notice through the appropriate legal channels. Cold? Maybe. But I'd given her fair warning and she'd chosen to ignore it. This was a consequence of her own decisions, not some cruelty I was inflicting arbitrarily. The day she got served was something I'll never forget. I was at work when it happened. Got a call from my neighbor saying there was some kind of commotion at my house. By the time I got home, Megan was sitting on the porch sobbing while 2 of her friends loaded boxes into a truck. The eviction notice was crumpled in her hand. "You're really doing this," she said when I walked up. "You're really throwing me out like garbage. I gave you 30 days to leave on your own terms. You didn't take it. This is the consequence. I have nowhere to go, Ryan. My friends' places are temporary. My parents are an hour away. You're destroying my life. You destroyed this relationship when you decided I wasn't enough. I'm just following through." Her friend Jessica stepped forward with that aggressive beastie energy. "You're a monster, you know that? Megan gave you 3 years of her life, and this is how you treat her?" Megan spent the last several months of those 3 years sleeping with someone else while telling me I was too boring to find anyone better. So maybe save the moral outrage for someone who deserves it. That shut Jessica up pretty quick. Apparently, Megan hadn't shared that particular detail with her support squad. The silence that followed was almost satisfying. By evening, Megan was gone. Her stuff was loaded into Jessica's truck, and she was headed to stay with her parents until she could figure something out. She tried one last time to have a closure conversation, but I declined. There was nothing left to say. The house felt different after she left. Quieter, obviously, but also lighter somehow. Like a pressure I hadn't even realized was there had finally released. I spent that first night alone just sitting on my couch, thinking about everything that had happened. The house felt like mine again for the first time in years. I didn't feel guilty. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. Megan had made her choices, and those choices had consequences. That's how life works. Natalie came over the next day with pizza and a concerned expression. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected, honestly. It feels like it's been over for months. This was just making it official. For what it's worth, I think you handled it well. Most guys would have either caved to the manipulation or gotten ugly about it. You just stayed calm and followed through. I work with numbers and contracts. Emotion doesn't change the math." She laughed. Romantic. I have my moments. The aftermath played out pretty much how you'd expect. Megan moved back in with her parents and spent the next several months bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen. According to her version of events, I was a controlling narcissist who'd kicked her out with no warning because I was obsessed with some younger woman. The open relationship thing was conveniently omitted or reframed as something I'd pressured her into. I didn't bother correcting the narrative. People who knew me knew the truth. People who didn't weren't worth the energy. Her friend group dropped me completely, which was fine. They'd always been more her people than mine anyway. A few mutual acquaintances reached out for my side of the story, but I just told them the basics and let them draw their own conclusions. The only person I really cared about understanding was Natalie, and she'd seen enough firsthand to know what was real. We kept dating through the winter and into spring. Things got serious gradually, naturally, without any of the forced intensity that had marked my relationship with Megan. We moved at a pace that made sense for both of us, instead of rushing towards some predetermined milestone. What I noticed most was how different it felt to be with someone who actually appreciated the qualities that Megan had criticized. Natalie loved that I planned things out. She found it reassuring rather than boring. When I remembered details about her life and followed up on things she'd mentioned, she saw it as caring rather than obsessive. Same behaviors, completely different interpretation. Turns out the problem wasn't me being too stable or too attentive. The problem was being with someone who didn't value those things. 8 months after the breakup, I ran into Megan at a grocery store of all places. She looked different, tired, worn down, like the past several months had aged her considerably. We made awkward eye contact across the produce section. For a moment, I thought she might just pretend she hadn't seen me, but instead she walked over. "Hey," she said quietly. "How have you been?" "Good. Really good, actually." "How about you?" She shrugged. "Getting by. Still at my parents' place. The rental market is insane right now." "Yeah, I've heard that." Awkward silence. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she finally said, "about what happened with us. I know I messed up. I know I was unfair to you. Brandon was a mistake. The open relationship thing was a mistake. All of it." I nodded. "Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say, Megan?" "I don't know. Something more than okay. Are you still with that girl? Natalie?" "Yeah. We're moving in together next month, actually." Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or regret. "She's lucky." I grabbed my groceries and headed toward checkout, leaving her standing there among the apples and oranges. Natalie and I moved in together that summer. She sold her condo, and we combined households in the house that Megan had once called too boring to call home. We repainted the bedroom, bought new furniture for the living room, turned the spare room into a home gym, made it ours instead of what it had been before. Her dog Chester and my cat Wallace learned to coexist after some initial tension. We hosted barbecues for our friends in the backyard. We planned vacations months in advance and actually followed through on them. 6 months after the grocery store encounter, I proposed to Natalie during a trip to Hocking Hills. Same waterfall where I'd proposed to Megan, actually. Some people might think that's weird, but I wanted to reclaim that spot. Make new memories there instead of letting the old ones own it. She said yes before I even finished the question. Started crying and laughing at the same time while I slid the ring on her finger. A hiker walking by started clapping, and we both just stood there grinning like idiots. The wedding was last spring. Small ceremony at this vineyard outside Columbus. About 60 people total. My parents, her parents, our closest friends. Nobody from Megan's orbit. Craig was my best man and gave this toast about how I'd finally found someone who deserved me. Natalie's sister cried through the whole ceremony. My mom took about 400 photos. The reception went until midnight. We did the first dance to this song Natalie had picked out, some acoustic cover of a classic that I'd never heard before but now can't listen to without getting emotional. Her dad danced with her, and I danced with my mom, and there wasn't a dry eye in the place. Her dad pulled me aside at the reception and handed me the keys to that old Ford truck he'd been restoring. Said he wanted me to have it as a wedding gift. I tried to refuse, but he wasn't having it. Told me I'd earned it by treating his daughter right. The truck's sitting in my garage now, fully restored and road ready. Take it out every Sunday just to keep it running smooth. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Costa Rica. Zip lining, beach time, this incredible food tour through San Jose. We planned the whole thing 3 months in advance, made reservations at every restaurant, booked every excursion ahead of time. Natalie loved every minute of it. Said it was the most relaxing vacation she'd ever taken because she didn't have to worry about anything going wrong. Meanwhile, things kept getting worse for Megan. According to mutual friends who still kept tabs on her, she'd burned through 2 more relationships in the year after our breakup. First guy was some musician she met at a bar who turned out to be living with his parents at 34. Talked a big game about touring and record deals, but spent most of his time playing video games in his childhood bedroom. That lasted about 2 months before she came to her senses. Second was a coworker situation that ended badly when he got transferred to a different city and didn't invite her to come along. She'd apparently been telling everyone they were serious, planning their future together. The whole thing. He saw it as casual, history repeating itself in reverse. Brandon never came back from Seattle. Apparently, he'd met someone out there and gotten engaged within 6 months. Posted the whole thing on Instagram with captions about finding his soulmate and building a life together. The exact kind of commitment he'd told Megan he wasn't ready for. Megan found out through Instagram and had some kind of public meltdown in the comments section before her friends talked her into deleting everything. Screenshots circulated anyway. Always do. Her parents finally gave her an ultimatum around the 1-year mark. Get her life together, or find somewhere else to live. They'd been patient, they said, but they couldn't watch her spiral forever. She needed to take responsibility for her choices and stop waiting for someone else to fix her problems. She ended up moving into a small apartment with 2 roommates, working full-time at an event planning company while trying to rebuild her career. Started from the bottom again at 30, sharing a bathroom with strangers and splitting grocery bills 3 ways. A far cry from the house she'd once called boring. The final update came about 18 months after the breakup. My buddy Craig ran into her at a coffee shop, and she asked about me. He told her I was married, that Natalie and I had just bought a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood, that we were talking about starting a family. She apparently just nodded and said, "Good for him," before walking away. No drama, no tears, no desperate attempt to reconnect, just acceptance. That's when I knew it was really over. Not just the relationship, but the whole chapter. She'd finally stopped hoping for a different ending. As for me and Natalie, we closed on the new house last month. 4 bedrooms, big backyard, finished basement. The kind of place where you raise kids and host holidays and build a life. I've already started planning the nursery layout even though we're not pregnant yet. Natalie caught me sketching floor plans last week and just laughed. "You're already 3 steps ahead, aren't you?" Always. I love that about you. 3 years ago, that same quality got me called boring and predictable by someone who thought excitement meant chaos. Now it gets me a wife who actually appreciates what I bring to the table. The engagement ring I'd bought for Megan? Returned it for store credit a week after the eviction. Used the money toward Natalie's ring instead. Bigger stone, better setting, way better recipient. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or complicated. Sometimes it's just building a good life with someone who actually wants to be there. Reddit, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Update since people asked, Natalie's pregnant. Found out 2 weeks ago. Due date is in March. I've already got a spreadsheet tracking everything we need to buy, a timeline for setting up the nursery, and a list of pediatricians to interview. She showed the spreadsheet to her mom, and they both laughed about how I can't help being organized. But then her mom said something that stuck with me. "Your father was the same way when I was pregnant with Natalie. Some women want spontaneous. Smart women want prepared." I'll take that as a win. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.